Yeah, but so this particular mission assignment was a 3-person team that was selected to go. Myself representing the National Archives, because in this particular case, one of my specialties is essential records. Records that pertain to the rights and interests of individuals, you know, like military records, contracts, medical records, that kind of stuff. I was asked then to join this team to be there representing that area of specialization, the essential records. Katie Wagner from the Smithsonian is a book conservator, paper conservator with the Smithsonian. And Ashley Yaley is an objects conservator who specializes in African art. We had some damaged African art at the university there. So we had her join the team as well. Very good team. It worked out fantastic. So 2 Smithsonian, 1 National Archives person. That's one of the things I like about these mission assignments, is that we responders get to work with sister institutions and organizations. We get to meet people in the community that represent history and culture. So it's not all just give, and give both ways. So we were there for 14 days. We did 27 damaged records assessments, some of them pretty serious, some of them not so much. So you might have a cultural institution that said, wow, that was interesting. I don't want that hurricane, something like this happening again, so how do I prepare for it? Would you please give us some tips on how to be in a better position the next time? So that was some of the assessments, but many times it was, would you take a look at these records and see what you think, and then you see mold on it, and you scratch a little bit further and there's more mold, and then get down a little bit further and there's more mold and more mold. So we saw a lot of kinds of exotic mold there in the Virgin Islands. So 27 damaged records assessments on the 3 major islands, St. Thomas, St. John, and St. Croix. We spent most of our time on St. Thomas. And here's a partial list of the assessments, the organizations that we worked with. Territorial Archives on St. Thomas, the Territorial Legislative Archives on St. John, the University of the Virgin Islands, and its African American art collection there on St. Thomas, hospitals on St. Thomas and St. Croix, tax assessor and recorder of deeds. Now we're getting into essential records, records that pertain to financial interest of individuals. Tax assessor and recorder of deeds on St. Croix and St. Thomas. Vital statistics records, we're talking about birth and death records on St. Croix and St. Thomas. And a whole host of different museums, historic sites, archives, libraries, special collections. That's just a partial list. Okay, you recognize me on the left here, of course, in the Tyvek, that's me. I could say I was the person on the right, the skinny, taller person, but that won't work. We're fully geared out, Tyvek, with the hoodies, the footies, the gloves, respirator mask, and you really, really need that. One of the things I'm struck by is so many places we do this, whether it's New Orleans, whether it's Virgin Islands, whether it's Puerto Rico, is we're geared out, and the people that work there are not. So I feel sorry for the individuals that have to deal with this. You shouldn't touch this stuff. It's that bad. So what you see here are some legislative books. Now the typical leather-bound journals that have lots of mold, insects, all kinds of bad insects inside there, and who knows what else. These records, as you see there in the picture on the left, are up on a table, but when we arrived, they were in boxes on the floor. So hurricane came in, water just rushed into the building, and people like to put records on the first floor. So these records got wet, very, very wet. And then they got wet again, and again by the time we got there. Hurricanes hit in September, we were there in March. So that record on the right, when I held it like that, was actually dripping water. So it's not from the original hurricanes, Maria and Irma. It's from other tropical storms that came up since then, most likely. So on the right-hand side, you see something that I've seen before, but that's about as good an example of that as I've ever seen. And that depends on the type of ink, the pen that you use, and it mixes with water, and you get this run. You've seen something like that on a smaller scale. What is interesting about this is that now you have mold that's growing into that, and the mold becomes a pigmented mold. So it becomes purple. So it's not just running ink, that's actually mold expanding in there too. These records were very important. They were very concerned about these because the transfer date for the Virgin Islands from Denmark to the United States was in 1917. Some of these books are in Danish, which means they date pre-1917, and they're not making those anymore. So that's pretty unique, and they were very concerned about the condition of the Danish period records, and we did have some Danish in these. So there we are, the three of us, the team, geared up on the left, ready to go into the territorial archives here. And we tried, right in front of where we were at, the tourists were walking by there in St. Thomas, and we didn't realize the way we look. You know, tourists look at that and say, oh my gosh, what's happening here? This doesn't look, like, this is not something normal. These people look like something from some horror movie, the way we're geared up. So we had to be careful about going out the back and taking off the gear back there when it was time. So on the right-hand side, this particular site did not have intrusion of water. They lost power, and that is what you see there is it's very humid, and the mold began to grow. Yes?
Did y'all have to change clothes every day?
Yeah. Yes, good question. The Tyvek suits are disposable. So I had a shipment for Virgin Islands, I think I sent down 25 suits. I was there for 2 weeks. You come out of there, plus you are sweating, and it's dirty, and you've been dealing with all these exotic molds. Who knows what's in those molds? You discard the suit and the clothes, not the mask. Good question. And there on the right-hand side, you can see just what you get from humidity, not that these records got wet. And that was fairly common on the Virgin Islands. Puerto Rico, we have been involved in 3 mission assignments in Puerto Rico. The first one was in November and December of 2017, the year that hurricanes hit, Irma and Maria. Puerto Rico got hit hard. The hurricanes kind of converged on Puerto Rico. So in 2017, I didn't go on that mission assignment, but I helped organize it. And one of my colleagues led that mission. And that was a multi-agency deployment. We had National Park Service, the Department of Interior, National Archives, had 3 people on this mission assignment, plus the leader, Vicki Lee. I think we had Smithsonian on this one, and Center for Disease Control. And I set that one out. Then this one came up November of this last year. And it's a 1-person mission assignment, so I guess technically I was the lead, because it's a 1-person mission assignment. And really what they wanted is, it had been 1 year since the first mission assignment. They being FEMA, wanted a reassessment of where we stood for archival records, permanent records, essential records, and have somebody go in and take a look. And I was selected to do that based on the work I did in the Virgin Islands. So real quick, short notice, fly in, spend a week there, and I was only in San Juan because that was the biggest concern with the records that were there. I did several damaged records assessments, and I made recommendations for a future mission because I saw some things that I said, we need to get started on another mission, and we need some specialty people on that one. Motion picture film people is what I wanted, and I'll explain that in a little bit. That's not my area of expertise, but I knew enough that I saw. I didn't like what I saw. I needed some help. All right, so this is still that November 2018 mission assignment at the Archivo General Archives. It equates to the National Archives of the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico, or Territorial Archives is what we would typically call it. Very important archives. Very large building. The building was built in 1877. Heavily damaged during the hurricane. The Department of Labor next door lost its entire top floor, not roof, floor. That flipped over and came down on top of the Archivo General and damaged that building, this building, right over the records. The very important land ownership records, essential records. And some of those are permanent records to boot. The land ownership records are permanent, but also other kinds of permanent records. And we knew that they had suffered this damage, but how bad it was, we did not know. So there I come in there, November, we had a big rain at lunchtime, came back, and the water is coming down in that one picture, second from the right. You can see those little dots in the ceiling. That's water drops coming down. And they're coming down on the records. The records got wet when the hurricanes hit. And every time you had a major rain, the water was coming through the cracks. This is right under the roof of that 5-story building. And the water's coming down on these records. So that's when I first said, oh, we got a big problem here. This is important stuff, important records to have this kind of damage back and forth. It dries out and gets wet again, dries out and gets wet again. Look at the picture on the far right. That dusty looking color on those boxes, that's mold. And it was inside the boxes too. So we really had some issues there. The boxes, as you see on the second picture from the left, they're beginning to exfoliate. The boxes are disintegrating and records begin to fall out. So we need to do something about those. So that's, in a nutshell, what was happening there. Bad conditions, recommended, even though it's not our, they had buildings folks that had already recommended this, but they needed to have a roof on this place. The roof was terribly damaged by the heavy debris that had hit the top of this building and the side of this building. No elevators. Can you imagine working on a building where you're supposed to go up and down to get records and you have no elevators? Air conditioning in the beginning was iffy. So there was lots of issues at this particular location. And there I am, a little bit of gear there. I had to take my mask off in order to talk. And I look haggard, it's been a long day. And I'm talking to the document recovery guy on the left. And the guy that I'm facing, whose back is to us, is the field coordinator for the Department of Interior. They're the ones that pay my way to come down there and do these services. So he's listening in. He's a geologist. He finds records and information now. He says to be fascinating. He's exposed to something he was not familiar with. So recommended 675 feet of these wet, damp, moldy records, which are mostly the essential land ownership records. If you want to buy a piece of property in Puerto Rico and there's a dispute about the ownership, you have to go to these records to research them to prove ownership of the property. If you don't, it's going to be tied up in litigation for a long, long time. So that is being taken care of. I just found out this week that it's just almost ready to get out of the building and be treated. Vacuum, freeze, drying, irradiation to take care of the mold, extensive hand cleaning of the documents, rehousing in new folders, relabeling, reboxing, shipping them back to Puerto Rico. So that's coming pretty close to happening. Then on that November trip, I asked to see inside of a motion picture film vault. This location has some of the best film, allegedly, or reportedly, I should say, of anywhere in Puerto Rico. Very important, very unusual, unique film documenting the culture and the history of the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico. Got into it finally. The first mission assignment back in 2017, we're not able to get into it. And I asked before I left that first week in November. I got in there, and I got in there, smelled vinegar syndrome. That's the first step in degradation of film. Acetate film begins to break down. You have chemical reactions that happen, and you get into the vinegar syndrome, is what it's called. It's the worst vinegar syndrome I've ever smelled in my career, and that's when I said, we need another mission assignment to come back as soon as we can with film conservators. You know, I'm not a film conservator, but I want to, if I come back, I wanted to bring back some film people. And there's some good ones out there. So that led to, and y'all might have heard about a furlough that we had of 35 days. That delayed us getting back to Puerto Rico. So we were supposed to go down right after the first of the calendar year. So after the furlough then, we quickly put together this mission assignment. So in March, just a couple months ago, I went back down, I led the group. Vicki Lee, who led the original group, she's with NARA, she's a conservator, very experienced, been to Haiti, Virgin Islands, Puerto Rico, Germany. She's been to a lot of these, Superstorm Sandy, etc. So she was on the team. Audrey Amadon, who's a NARA motion picture preservation specialist. Mark White of the Smithsonian, who is a film and audio visual specialist. They came down to confirm my suspicions, and it was true. They had issues. So we were there for a full 2 weeks in San Juan, and the main focus really was that motion picture film assessment and what we were going to do about it. So it's the most significant film collection about Puerto Rico culture and history. 4,000 plus films and videos. And some film is relatively rare or may not even exist anywhere else. Some of it dates back to the 1920s. We didn't actually look at this particular reel of film, but somewhere in all those reels of film was a film about Charles Lindbergh making his Latin American tour 7 months after arriving in Paris on his transatlantic flight. And he arrived in Puerto Rico. They had film footage of that. So it's mixed in here somewhere. And we don't know if that particular film did okay yet, because we only had 2 weeks. We're trying to go through and determine condition as best we can. So a high number of these are at risk, we found. We detected, we were able to pinpoint where we had vinegar syndrome, mold, or actual deterioration. So here you see some reels of film, those little specks, that's mold. There in the middle picture, That's distortion. That's separation in acetate base. That is going to be hard to recover. It's very brittle. So just to make a copy of that would be very, very difficult. We actually found some film that is not going to be recoverable. We had some that had a brown goo that was coming off the film. That is the emulsion breaking down. This site, this area, had no power for 2 months. So it's a vault inside of a building. No power, heat's rising. It's a contained area, and that's where the vinegar syndrome really began to take off. That's where the degradation really began to take off that I had detected back in November. But the Puerto Rican staff had already begun to notice that some of the film even before this, and that's what that label in Spanish is off to the right. Vinegar syndrome, they knew what it was too. Then, not everything was in a vault. They had a vault that in the best of times had air conditioning and dehumidification. Dehumidifier is not working now, they got knocked out by the storm. Water did not come in the vault, but the temperatures rose so much that damage inside the vault began to happen. These that you're looking at here are in a different part of the building. It's a processing area. Now, processing not in the sense of processing film, but processing it in an intellectual sense of trying to get control and get your bibliographic information off of the reels of film. So they were staying out of the air-conditioned area before the storms hit, and they're processing it elsewhere. Storms hit, these films were in another part of the building that got pretty hot, got pretty humid. High level of vinegar syndrome in these reels of film as well. Some of these films won't survive. On the left-hand side, it's Audrey going through stacks of video, newsreels, news and TV coverage from an old format. And they shouldn't be stacked like that, they should be on their side. They should be on shelving, they should be on the floor, they shouldn't be stacked that. It's taller than she is. So that's a lot of weight for those that are on the bottom. That's it for motion picture. I don't want to spend too much time on it, but that's important to us. It's a big area of emphasis, and it continues to be an area of emphasis. And we've made recommendations on how to recover and how to finance it, and how that can be done. Still a lot of work to be done on that. I don't know, it's going to be another mission assignment. We made our recommendations, and we think the Puerto Rican staff can go ahead and get this together. We hope that we are successful in doing that. Another part of the building had still photograph negatives and images. Thousands and thousands of what you see here on the left-hand side, negatives inside of sleeves with nicely recorded information here on the sleeves. Problem is, they've gotten humid, kind of wet, damp. They got a little bit of mold on them. Some of the negatives are beginning to stick to each other and stick to the sleeves. So these need to come out of this area and come into an area that is now temperature and humidity controlled. That was one of our recommendations. Don't put these back in the area that we saw them in, which was a bad storage area. And why are these important? Well, they have some incredible images. I asked for some copies of images off of these, and you see some of them here. A little girl with the American flag. That's from a famous WPA photographer, Jack Delano. And he fell in love with Puerto Rico. He was there in 1941. And he spent some time there taking pictures, and he liked it so much that in 1946, he and his wife moved to Puerto Rico and stayed there until he died, not too long ago. So he continued to work down there and take pictures. And when I was given a debrief at FEMA before I left the Commonwealth, one of the guys from FEMA said, we saw the images, oh my gosh, that's a Jack Delano picture. Okay, I checked the photographic archivist at the Archivo General. Says, yeah, it is. It is. That's where it comes from. So that and some other famous photographers took some of these pictures. And obviously we don't want these to go away. This is important to the history and the culture of the people of Puerto Rico. I love the picture on the right. Obviously it's a break time. Everybody's got a cigarette at the same length. You know, so they on this break at the same time, and they're all smoking at the same. It's just funny. It's just it harkens to a different time.
I have a question.
Yes.
Can the degraded film be made into microfiche?
Which kind? Degraded?
The films that can't be recovered?
Yeah.
Can parts of them be made into microfiche?
Not microfiche or microfilm. What you can do with motion picture. Are you talking about motion picture?
Yeah.
For motion picture, in many cases, if you're going to save it, you recover by going to another safety film, or you go to a digitized copy. If you go to a digitized copy of that, then you have inherent benefits of having a digital copy of this. It's much easier to use, it's much easier to distribute.
I was just thinking part of it, so I didn't know whether that was an option.
Yeah, it is. It's expensive, regardless of what you do with it. It is expensive. Making copies of these negatives probably, in most cases, is not going to be necessary. Most likely, you're going to replace all these sleeves and give them new acid-free sleeves to put those in. But it's going to be labor intensive for some volunteers or for some staff to have to go through and redo all those and discard these, because these are no good anymore. They do have mold. And then you can also digitize negatives too. It's tricky, but you can do that. All right, so here's another location. This is an old San Juan for those that have been to Puerto Rico. It's not too far from where the other place is, but we had a place where they had some 20,000 building plans of the most historic buildings there in the Commonwealth. And I heard, well, in fact, they just asked for an assessment that they had some problems with maybe some records that had mold. And we found that, you know what, everything's got mold at this site. So it's going to be bigger and more expensive than what we found. So approximately some 20,000 building plans that are going to have to be cleaned. Probably, unless we find some moisture on them, you may be able to just go right into the cleaning phase on these and not go with the vacuum freeze drying. You might have to go with the irradiation. They still have some broken windows at the site, some broken doors, some leaks coming in through the walls. Very extensive, very thick walls. You can see there where I'm standing how thick those walls are. But still they have leaks coming in. So that one was quite a surprise that they threw kind of at the end once you go check these out. And it turned out to be a lot more than we expected. All right, so now I'm going to talk a little bit about lessons learned in general. This is not about Puerto Rico, it's not about U.S. Virgin Islands. It's more for you all here, because we're going to talk a little bit about Louisiana. So, lessons learned that I have found over the years, especially with Katrina, is to network, collaborate, to work with each other, know no boundaries, and get to know each other, who your points of contact are at other organizations. And it will help so so much to do that. Most of us don't represent an organization that's big enough to go it alone. We need help. And don't be afraid of asking for help. I suggest that you get acquainted with the subject matter experts, the points of contact, whether they be at FEMA, the Department of Interior. The Department of Interior, again, they're the one, even though FEMA funds that they come up with it, they give the money to Department of Interior. Department of Interior is who sends me to different places for a mission assigned team. That comes from the Department of Interior. So the Department of Interior, they're very important. They're a big part of how this all works. Of course, the National Archives, the Smithsonian Institution, very active in this area. They're players. They deploy. And they put their money where their mouth is. Louisiana State Archives. We're here in Louisiana. They're in Baton Rouge. But they represent the whole state. Get to know those folks as well. They're very helpful. Carrie Martin, she's the one that I usually deal with, going all the way back to Katrina. She's still around. And very, very helpful. Records recovery companies, I can't stress it enough. You learn so much by dealing with records recovery companies, the professionals. And they can give you intelligence with what's happened in a particular area and recommendations on what needs to be done. And I find them to be pretty straight shooters because they know the whole world is watching too. So they don't try to sell you. They really do a pretty good job of telling you what you need and what you don't need. For example, I've had organizations that wanted everything recovered. And a disaster recovery company representative said, you're wanting a supply closet of photocopier paper to be recovered, throw it out. Now, there's no sense in spending 10 times more of what that cost to recover it. So typically they're pretty honest and straight shooters. But you have all these other partners too to help out with this, and they'll certainly help you out. First responders, I'm talking about the fire departments, police, emergency management organizations. Get to know them, and get to know them before a disaster. And they're very, very helpful. And they've got good tips about your storage areas. What's right, what's wrong, from their standpoint. This is very important too. Develop disaster plans, also known as COOP plans. They go by different names. Some people call them records, recovery plans, etc. And test them. It does no good to put these things together and then put them up on a shelf. And then the disaster hits. That's not the place for it. So you need to have exercises, we call them tabletops. And then you learn from your tabletop exercises what's not working, and then you adjust your disaster plan based on that. And a big hint, make them electronic as well. Because, and I have been involved in this from the wrong side, when you want to get to that binder, it's inside the building, but the police are saying you can't get in there. And it's like, but my disaster plan is inside the building. So if you have electronically as well, you can still have your pre-binder, but have it electronically as well. It's accessible anywhere. And it's very, very important. All right, so the tip here too is, to the extent possible, it's a good idea of having both paper and electronic copies. because, for example, Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands had no power for up to 2 months. And if they'd had a disaster plan and only electronic version, they wouldn't be able to access it. So we're speaking out of both sides of our mouth. I know it's what it sounds like. It's sometimes good to have both, a pretty binder and an electronic copy. And you can say that too for your essential records, your vital records. And sometimes it's good to have them both ways, in an analog or paper format and electronic. All right, some other lessons learned. One of the things I saw with Katrina, and this happened in Mississippi, that's why I call it the Mississippi example, is that you had some local governments there that did something I didn't expect. And that is, you got something like a hurricane coming, it's predicted. You know it's coming, you know it's going to be bad. They actually would take their most important records and put them on trucks and go upstate with those. Disaster goes through, and as the storm goes through, hopefully it doesn't damage your buildings and such, and then you bring them back. It sounds like a lot of work, but it's less work, less money than what I was showing you earlier. So I had not seen that any other place other than I saw in Mississippi, and I said, that's not a bad idea, actually. That has merit. And also, some organizations move records away from harm to more secure buildings, off the first floor or off the top floor. And I call that the NASA and the VA example. VA in New Orleans, near the Superdome, did not have records on the top floor. Why? Because hurricanes tend to peel off roofs and let water in. Or water, especially in New Orleans, comes in, and if you're on the first floor, then you got a problem there too. So VA and NASA tend to stay away from that. There's probably more, because the lessons learned have been getting out there. And use them for other things, use them for offices or whatever the case may be. Try not to have them for your essential records, your vital records, your important records, your permanent records. And move records away from windows. Windows break, they leak, and besides you get light, it damages historic records anyway. But we see it over and over and over again, even storage areas where people will have windows. And that's a bad combination. Clean desk policies. FBI has gone to, or at least they had at the time when I was putting all this together, some time ago, the clean desk policy to put records away at the end of the day or for a weekend. They, with the Fort Worth example of the tornado, sucked out some of their files, and they had to go out and try to find them because they were on desk. And in New Orleans, the FBI SWAT team came in to take care of their own records that were stranded because of the storms. And I would imagine some of those were not stowed away properly. They had been on top of the desk and that sort of thing too. But the FBI strives to have clean desk policies. And I like this one. Use cloud storage or mirrored sites for backing up your computer information. Increasingly, we're seeing this, especially with federal agencies. You get smacked by whatever, human-caused, natural disaster, whatever, and you flip a switch and you're doing business somewhere else. It's almost that easy. You had it happen nearby with the National Finance Center, which is under the Department of Agriculture. Got hit by a tornado in 2017. And they were in business, I think it was the next day. People that were calling in, asking about their accounts and retirement information, didn't even know that the National Finance Center had been impacted. When you look at that building, some of the walls were blown out from the tornado, vehicles damaged, it was a mess. They invoked the coup plan and moved to, I think, Shreveport, I am not sure, but upstate someplace, and kept on doing business. A lot of their information is electronic, so that was enabled them to do that. So they are a success story. All right, and then some organizations also back up their data and move that off-site. They digitize their records. They duplicate, and disperse it. And that's very important. Don't just duplicate it and keep it local. You got to disperse it. Oh, and I see this one over and over and over again. Keep records off the floor. Don't put boxes on the floor. I was showing you that those moldy records earlier. They were on the floor. That's the worst place to have them. And make sure that the shelves are at least 3 inches off the floor. When you see shelving units, you got that kick plate at the bottom. What size is that? That's 3 inches. So that's where that comes from. They keep it what is fairly normal. Most of these disasters don't go over 3 inches of water in storage space. But you have to kind of look at the local situation. In New Orleans, you may want to go a bit higher before you start putting records on that bottom shelf. And then based on what happened with Katrina, as we were putting together the Fort Worth facility, which was just right after Katrina, we built it in 2006, we occupied it in late 2006, and I then came up with, we need to do something for electronic media as well. And I think the cloud is good, mirrored sites is good, but we have a lot of people with objects, media objects of various kinds. The federal government is very complex, and they have a lot of different pieces of equipment and hence output. And I pushed for the electronic records vault to be designed. I was on the design group for that. And we put that together. Fort Worth is the only federal facility to have one of these electronic records vaults. And it's for electronic essential information for federal agencies. Primarily justified because I wanted to take care of our federal agencies in Houston and New Orleans, in my area, in Corpus Christi. But lo and behold, most of our accounts are coming from other parts of the country. We are getting some from the coast, but I get a fair amount, or I'm not in charge of that anymore, but we get agencies from all over that are sending records. Why? Because it's the heartland, it's in Texas, and it's away from the coast, and they want to store their electronic essential information there. But that was kind of an effect of Katrina. All right, important thing to remember. Planning is relatively inexpensive. It's a hassle, but it's relatively inexpensive compared to the recovery of records and information. Again, 2005, spent over $1 million in Katrina, and that didn't even touch all of our costs. You know, we had so much else that we just never, it just never really bubbled up and was accounted for completely. We knew that. But it can be very, very expensive. A lot of people say planning, I ain't got time for that. Yes, you do have time for that. You have to do that. And as we say, as a disaster, it's a bad time to make key contacts to help you. Don't exchange business cards over a disaster site, you know, with key contacts. That's the wrong time to do it. Plan ahead and create a disaster plan. Silent disasters. I was asked to just touch on this. Here's some real life examples that we're familiar with at the National Archives. Rodents. And they will get into records. It is hard to keep rodents out. And they'll chew on paper when they're preparing their nest. They don't care. It's a nice little folder or 8.5 by 11 pieces of paper. They'll get in there and they'll scratch them up and make little shredded material out of your fine records. And they make good nests. So one of the tips, well, first off, is to have an integrated pest control system. Have contracts with pest control people, vendors to come in and monitor the types of insects that you have. They'll put out traps, and they will come in from time to time, check the traps, see what kind of insects you're getting. And we'll check for rodents, and then they'll come up with a plan to eradicate your rodent problem and your insect problem. So that's part of it, is to have an integrated pest control. We do at the National Archives and all of our facilities where we store records. Library of Congress, etc. You got to do it right, or you can have problems like you see on the right-hand side. The box that you see there, that is called a mouse hole. That's what we call it. It's designed so you can hook your finger in there and pull that box off the shelf. That's pretty nice. It lets in dust, it lets in mold, and it lets in rodents. So we call it mouse holes. Mouse holes are taboo now. We do not like mouse holes for the storage of permanent records. One of the biggest problems we see is termite damage. Termites are a common cause of damage to paper records. Most often where we see it is where you have shelving units that are up against a wall. And where the termites come from, they come from the cracks in the floor, up the wall with their little pipes that they make, little chimneys, and little pathways, and then they cross over into, oh, you provided dinner at this place? And then they're into your records, and they tear your records up, and that's what you get. Is that kind of a situation? Silent disaster. Because by the time you find out about it, you have to retrieve something out of that. That's bad news when you got to tell the person that's requested this, can you come back some other time? You know, this stuff is not ready to be served. Served to termites, but not to researchers. So don't keep records against a wall. That's the lesson learned there. Another example of a different type of insect damage. This is probably caused by a paper-eating insect. Damage to these records probably dates back a couple hundred years. These records were in the 1700s. But they look like lace. When you hold them up and you can see, this is one of the better ones. I've got pictures that there's more holes than there are pieces of paper there. And at this point, what can you do? Probably the best thing to do when it gets like this is to go ahead and digitize it and retire the originals. Don't serve those because they're too fragile to give to researchers. Researchers are going to break them in half. Or fragments are going to fall on the floor of your research room. So digitizing is probably as good as you're going to get. Put a white piece of paper behind it and digitize it. Move on. Retire these. More silent disasters. Leaky sprinkler heads. Gotta have them. They're more good than they are bad. But they do leak from time to time. Hey, we at the National Archives, if you ever walk through one of our facilities, even the installers say, we love you. We have never seen so many sprinkler heads. This is great. Occasionally some of them leak. How do we try to combat that? We frequently inspect for these areas. We get up on ladders and we look out across the sea of boxes, looking for little dark spots of something's happening over in row number 4. Somebody get on a ladder over there, get up there and take a look at it. Uh-oh, we got a problem. We got a leak on sprinkler head such and such. It can really, I don't know if anybody saw it last week. Illinois. It's now with the Illinois State Archives, but it started off with a county where they had some judicial books, leather-bound books on top of the shelving units. Been up there for years. Unbeknownst to them, they've been leaking above those, and now it's like a brick. And they turned it over to the state archives and said, what can we do with this? So you need to frequently inspect. Some say do it daily. My gosh, the National Archives is a 210,000 square foot facility. That's very tough for us to do. When I was at the Library of Virginia, we had we had 26-foot tall shelves. We had Raymond order papers. We could ride to the top and look out across the city of records. That didn't take very long. But if you're pushing ladders around, it takes a while to do that. But do it as frequently as you can. So, air conditioning units, that's another place. Any kind of equipment. Drainage pipes, roof pipes that come down through records areas, frowned upon. But that's where you could get some leakage too. Leaky roofs, always have to be on the lookout for those things. And you see some boxes there that just had leaks from above. All right, other silent disaster dangers. Poor security. We have people that walk out with records all the time. Not we as in the National Archives, I'm talking about collectively. These things happen. People steal records. Sometimes they will take razor blades and cut out maps out of books, out of records, because they like maps. And you can frame them and sell them. And it used to be people would take razor blades and cut out Abraham Lincoln's signature and sell the autograph. And when I worked at the Indiana State Archives at the beginning of my career, we had different pieces of paper that had Abraham Lincoln's signature, supposed to anyway. We had a hole where Abraham Lincoln's signature had been, because somebody had come in and cut it out. So poor security, poor handling techniques. You can have paper that's pretty fragile, like I was showing with the lace a while ago, and have somebody come in that just doesn't appreciate it. And they go whipping through the pages, rip those pages. Happens all the time. Improper lighting, temperature, humidity, air quality, those things can all impact what happens to records. Food and drink taboo in an archives. I've picked up many an archival record with a coffee cup stain on them for somebody to set them on. Worse yet, I've seen cigarette damage where somebody had it on an archival record at some point way in the history. Metal fasteners, paper clips that are metal, they rust. Tape. I see it all the time. I saw in Puerto Rico recently some beautiful, beautiful archival records with loads of tape on them. Oh, that stuff's hard to get off. Staples, they rust. Rubber bands, chemically they break down and they stick to paper. And that's a whole different problem. Acidic paper, it's not stable, it turns brown and it breaks, it falls apart. Probably has to be reformatted if you're going to keep it. Strain of technology. We've got different kinds of electronic records, media, floppy disk, that you can't use anymore. How do you get the information off of it? So it's kind of a silent disaster if you don't get it off there and find out what you got. It's silent. Strain of technology. It's a big issue. Viruses. Frequently we see that. We see it in the federal level from time to time. You get viruses and they say, I can't access it. It's on this hard drive. But what's on there, I don't know, but it's a virus. I don't want to plug it into something else because, dang, it's bad. Rot, distortion, scratches in various DVDs, CDs, your videotapes, your audio, etc. So it's not a huge disaster in the sense of a Katrina or something like that. Collectively, though, it adds up, and it has to be addressed. So other resources are items of interest. One of the things I want to talk about is something that we've been working on the last couple of years, leading up to August 2018, what used to be called the Vital Records Guide for the federal government. And I led a work group of different people on subject matter experts in different departments. And we updated this, renamed it the Essential Records Guide. Why? Because vital records, especially in localities, has the connotation of birth, death records. And it doesn't have that connotation with the federal government, so we were okay with vital. The state archivist lobbied FEMA to change their use of the terminology. And FEMA said, sounds good to us. So FEMA started calling it essential records. And then I left us over by ourselves, NARA, saying, okay, I guess we better change. So when we updated this, it went from Vital Records Guide to Essential Records Guide. So we present a common front. So the previous edition, although it was good, it was established back in 1996, and very useful. By the way, it's cited by a lot of state archives, foreign countries, as being the definitive source for the handling of essential records. And you can use some of the same information, the same guidelines for managing permanent records too. So don't get hung up on the essential records part. A lot of it pertains to permanent as well. So it had been quite useful. It was quite good. But over the intervening 22 years, from 1996, it had not been updated. So it had kind of gotten out of whack. So we corrected the errors that it crept in. We updated the terminology, like vital to essential and other things too. We downsized it, because it was 90 pages. Now it's 53 pages. And because most records are born digital these days, we then begin to put more about electronic information into this new publication. And we're partners with FEMA. FEMA gives out some guidance on essential records as well. So I did not want to ignore FEMA's guidance in this publication, so we linked that information in as well. So it's federal in focus, but it's useful to all organizations. And I find historical societies, libraries, museums, etc. I say, this has got some good information. Yeah, it's really for everybody, even though it's designed for the federal government. Others can use it as well. So here's what it looks like. We introduced a little color. We're fed, so we don't put too much color in there. We don't put too much design. So there it is on the left-hand side. And it's electronic only. There is no hard copy on this. So it is at our website, and I'll show you the link to that in just a minute. But there in the middle, well, the two pictures both show this. They wanted to incorporate more examples, more images, more pictures. The last one didn't have it. It was just a bunch of text, 90 pages of text. So we wanted more pictures to illustrate what we're trying to convey. And we put, I don't know how many hot links in here. So if we talk about an international standard, if we talk about another agency and how they do something, we talk about a FEMA guidance, we talk about a regulation, a statute, etc., we hot link it from here. So if you're at our website, you don't have to say, well, I have to go look that up. I have to go over and Google that later. Just hit our hot link, and we're going to keep us up to date. And you'll go right to that guidance. So I think that's one of the best benefits of this, is all of that hot links. With that comes the responsibility of keeping it up. But in the middle, that picture, just to show you that it doesn't, I'm not just preaching. You know, this happens to us too. That's the National Archives Center. That's St. Louis. That's our National Military Personnel Records Center. 1973, we suffered a major fire. It burned uncontrolled for 4 days. And we lost 16 to 18 million military personnel records, including my father's World War II military record. It's burned up, it's gone. So those have to be reconstructed to the best that they can from other sources. You can imagine the effort that's involved with that. So that was a lesson learned for us. Talk about your essential records. Those are essential records. You have veterans that need this information for veterans hospitals, for medical treatment, for burial, so financing for homes, that sort of thing, GI bills, etc. So, wow, what a lesson learned there. I put that in here, and one of our senior managers, senior leadership said, did you have to put the National Archives in this? Could you use some other example? But I thought it was very important to have it in here. And then you see the far picture again, it's just an example of getting into the electronic, even though this is electronic objects. It's not that sophisticated compared to the cloud, mirror sites, that sort of thing. Still, some agencies like to download information off of their systems and give us data dumps or whatever the case may be. We've got some very important records in that electronic records vault. So how do you get to it? At our website, when you first pull up our site, and you go to records management, there is a link there for essential records and disaster recovery. And you click on that and it will take you to where you need to go. This is the landing page. This is the new landing page that we built around this. Or you can just Google Federal Essential Records. First thing that's going to pop up is this. So what this landing page is, you see where the star is not going to be on the page. Let's just do that to call your attention to it. That's where the records, the Essential Records Guide resides. But we have other statutes, regulations rather, they're in the middle, emergency disposal of contaminated federal records, and reporting on authorized disposal of federal records. That doesn't pertain to any of you in the room, I don't think. Upper right-hand corner, NARA points of contact. So you need some assistance, you've got something that's happened, or you've got a question, that's going to give you all kinds of numbers, more numbers than you can imagine of who to call to get answers to your questions. Lower left-hand corner, these are the document recovery companies. We're a clearinghouse for information on all the document recovery companies. You click on that and you're going to get information from all of them. We're not endorsing any particular company. We're just providing a clearinghouse for that information. Very useful. We have contracting officers all over the place, state, local, etc., that are going to that to find out, whoops, we got a problem. And they go to this, they look it up, and then they're able to contact somebody that can provide the services that they need. And then the FEMA guidance are linked to them, they're linking to us. So we go both ways. And there it is. I had noticed somewhere. Up there near the new landing page is a link if you need that information on how to get to it. Again, I personally just do Google. I don't even go through all of our links to get to this particular site. I'll just go ahead and Google and I'm right in. All right, a sea change. One of the big things that's going to happen to you all, it's happening to us right now. In our current strategic plan for the National Archives, 2018 to 2012, or 2022, we're going to be going backwards, 2018 to 2022, is that, and I say here it's a bold new direction on how we're going to protect and preserve federal government records, both permanent and temporary. And also information into the future. How are we going to do that? The strategic plan, which I had nothing to do with the writing of that, is really quite bold. And a determination is made, a red line is drawn, and it says that by the end of the year, 2022, that the National Archives, to the fullest extent possible, will no longer accept transfers of permanent or temporary records in paper format, and will accept records only in electronic format that have the appropriate metadata. It means that they've been done correctly, not that they've just been scanned somehow and you haven't done it the correct way, but that you've done it properly. So, for an agency, you saw those stats earlier, it has all this paper. We're going to continue to keep the paper, of course. We'll manage the paper, but this is going to stem the growth of taking in paper records. So we're kind of going over the hump. We're making a commitment, and the agencies are beginning to say, explain to me how this works again. We weren't as aggressive as you are with going to electronic records. They have to go to electronic records now if they want their records to be stored permanently at the National Archives. So that's a big change. I gave a presentation to the State Historical Records Advisory Board in Texas recently, and I mentioned this, and it's like, uh-oh, if that's happening at the National Archives, our leadership is going to see this, and they're going to be thinking, we probably ought to be heading that direction too. So, yes, that's kind of what happens in many states. Hey, look at the federal government for what they're doing. They're doing that. We can use that as an example or a justification or whatever we want to call it for our strategic direction and moving that direction as well. And there is, if you wanted to see that strategic plan, is the link to this. And I assume that these are probably going to be available if you want to share, if you can. Or just contact me if you want the information. I'll be happy to share it with you. All right, one of the last things I was asked to, one of the things I was asked by the conference organizers to include, and it's one of the last things I'll discuss, is we're getting into environmental issues here. Sea level rise and loss of land, which is so important here in Louisiana. I've been reading up on it. I've been seeing what's going on. The predictions are not good. Land loss is a huge issue. And it could have impact on records and information, archival records, museums, etc. So I have included a little bit in here, some common sense kind of stuff. Probably no major revelations, but I have included some things. My son is a recent PhD from Texas A&M in College Station. He's postdoc over there, and this is his area of study. So I get more of my information, I get my information from wherever, and I share with him, and he says, yeah, it's old hat, yeah, of course, yeah, it's this, and this, and this. And if his mother and myself talk about, well, kind of like a beach house and such, he says, you might want to think about a different area than, I'm not talking about Louisiana, but I'm talking about other places in Texas or wherever, because of this very issue. So he monitors it very closely and certainly says it's a major issue as well. So I was looking at different information on this about sea level rise and impact on southern Louisiana. And I came across this that you all probably seen too, and that is the article, interesting article from Tulane's recent study that was published in Ocean Science back in January of this year. And if you read between the lines on this, it really does paint a picture that should also concern us in the historical and cultural communities. And of course their prediction is that it's going to get worse. It's not going to get better in the near term. So, a few possible approaches. My favorite one is the first one. And that is probably the best, most reliable way, is to scan those paper records. Yes, we want the originals in many cases, There's no substitute for the originals. But if you want to protect the information, then in many cases, in a situation like what we're talking about here, this is a prudent way of addressing the situation. Digitize the paper records, place them in the cloud, or disperse the digital circuits, another good way of saying copy, to other locations. They're protected then. And I've seen that time and time again in the last 10, 15 years where this comes into play, where in some cases we as a society lose the originals, and yet we still have information. And it's important to our society that we have that information that's contained on the records. Records are nice, they're important. I'm an old-time archivist. I love the paper. I love the smell of the paper, I love the texture, I love the feel. I think you can learn so much more about the topic by actually holding the records. And there's no substitute totally for the paper records. But this is a good way of protecting the information. Another possibility, and I don't like this one as much because it's expensive, is build structures, of course, that are better protected. You see studies all this all the time, announcements, cool ideas that different architects come up with about protecting buildings and its contents from storm surge and the increasingly stronger hurricanes that we're all experiencing. Things like elevate, put them on piers, use better materials, better design to kind of shed the effects of hurricanes, for example. But as I said, that can be expensive, and a lot of us don't have that kind of money. Most of us don't. Relocate most important or valuable physical records to more protected venues. And that kind of gets back into that Mississippi example. If it's short term, and you move records inland, move them somewhere else where they're better protected. Works well for hurricanes that are predictable, but even hurricanes are not always predictable. They can change course. And doesn't work though very well with flash floods, tornadoes, fires, wildfires, that sort of thing. Human-caused disasters. Doesn't work very well with those. So my favorite is digitization. And I think that, not ideal, but it's probably as good as we've got, and it's probably the most realistic. My computer needs to be no. Not yet. All right, so what can NARA do to help? What we do, and this is from one of our support statements, is that we'll provide support to the strike natural, because we're focusing on cultural and historical NCH resources protection function of FEMA's National Response Framework. And that includes providing preservation, scientific, technical, and records and archival management advice and information for stabilization, security, logistics, and contracting for recovery services of damaged resources pertaining to documentary and archival records and historic documents. Essentially, we'll help. You just need to contact us, and we will do what we can do. Our Preservation Programs Department, I am not a part of Preservation Programs, I'm with the Office of the Chief Records Officer, but I'm very familiar with what they do. And they oversee what is called ESF 11, or Emergency Support Function number 11. I know this is sounding kind of federal, but that's something that means certain things to certain people. And they provide a template and information for how to contract for these services from a records recovery company. And that information is on our website at archives.gov, and it's for your use. is specifically for state, local, tribal, and other cultural institutions. Who else can help? One of my favorites, HINTEF, Heritage Emergency National Task Force, HINTEF. And it's their mission to protect cultural heritage in our nation's states, tribes, territories, and local communities from the damaging effects of disasters and other emergencies. They have 5 objectives. By the way, HINTEF is under, the administrator is paid by FEMA. They say it's FEMA/Smithsonian. So the administrator is paid by FEMA. And she resides either from home in Massachusetts or at the Smithsonian. So it's a combination of the two. And I'll talk about who she is in just a minute. So they'll also, number one, and what they will do, they do a lot in providing education and training to you all. Cultural stewards, first responders, emergency managers, to better prepare you all for working together to address emergencies and disasters affecting cultural institutions and historic sites. Number 2, provide technical assistance, guidance, and resources to, again, the same audience, which is very important to have that person in your camp that can help you out when she can. Number 3, coordinate the collection and sharing of incident-specific information. She and I have been doing this since Katrina, sharing information. Did you hear about U.S. Army Corps of Engineers? Did you hear about Department of Interior? Did you hear about the Department of Navy? We do that kind of stuff back and forth to share that information. And I just shared some information with her. We had a courthouse fire in Tennessee 2 days ago. Destroyed a lot of records. And I sent her a message. She said, "Ah, thank you." One I hadn't picked up on yet. So we do that all the time. Number 3, coordinate the collection. Oh, see, that's it. I already said that. Number 4, increase the incorporation of cultural and historic resources into disaster planning and hazard mitigation efforts at all levels of government. And number 5, provide information and guidance to the public, to help individuals and families protect, stabilize, and recover treasured possessions before, during, and after an event. They have been putting a lot of family history type workshops with emphasis on how to recover that shoebox of photos that are in the bed in the case of a disaster and other kinds of personal records. And they did that in Texas with Hurricane Harvey. HINTEF was there to put on those kinds of workshops, talking to the media, and they do some fantastic work. So there, at the bottom, you see the link to their website for HINTEF. It's one of your best sources. And your contact is the administrator of HINTEF, and that is Lori, L-O-R-I, Foley, F-O-L-E-Y, at hintef@si.edu. One of the best resources that you have. You need that in your electronic Rolodex. Another entity that can help you is the Conservation Center for Art and Historic Artifacts. I don't like the names of any of these places. They're hard to remember. And the acronym just doesn't work either. CCAHA. They're in Philadelphia. They're good. The Conservation Center for Art and Historic Artifacts is a non-profit conservation facility specializing in the treatment of works on paper, photographs, and books through conservation and state-of-the-art digital imaging services. So if you need those services, they are a player. And there's their telephone number and their website information, their website. And It serves nonprofit cultural institutions, private individuals, and other collecting organizations. And their preservation staff present educational programs, conduct preservation assessments, and develop emergency preparedness plans. And I say you really need to develop a disaster plan. These are folks that can help you with that. They have examples. They have templates on how you can do that. They also offer fellowships, fundraising support, and disaster assistance. Another organization, and this will be the last of the organizations, is the American Institute for Conservation, AIC, and the FAIC is their foundation. They work together to promote the preservation and protection of cultural heritage. They should be certainly somebody that you keep a little yellow sticky note up on the computer. This is one that's very important. You got the contact information there. They deal with funding, career, as far as learning opportunities, emergencies, disaster response and recovery guides. The Alliance for Response. Alliance for Response is a combination of the heads of cultural institutions and first responders. It's like 50-50 for these meetings. They're one-day meetings held at different cities, different venues. I think New Orleans may have been one last year, and I couldn't go because I was in the Virgin Islands at the time. I've spoken at these in Seattle, Los Angeles, San Diego, Houston, Dallas. I have found them to be really, really good opportunities. So if you get a chance to go to an Alliance for Response meeting, they're free, and they give you lunch, and they're wonderful educational opportunities. National Heritage Responders, these are volunteers. They're conservators on call that will come and help. And they cover a lot of their own expenses. They have to take leave. Vicki Lee, that I was talking about earlier at the National Archives, she is a National Heritage Responder. There's only about 100 of them. And she's been to Germany, Haiti, Virgin Islands, different places on her own dime. So they're very helpful. They're there to serve. They're there to help you. So good resources under the AIC. Risk evaluation and planning programs. They can help you with how to determine your risk level. May Day. May Day is typically May 1st, but sometimes it goes beyond that. And it's just an awareness of what can go wrong and what you need to do and how you need to prepare for disasters. They have a publication at their website called Getting Ready in Indian Country for Native Americans and tribes. Have some good tips there, so that might be useful for some. They're interested in that. Collections care on how to properly care for some of the tips I've been talking about. Grants. As I said before, you can't rely upon FEMA for everything. FEMA will push back. They have rules. They're not going to fund everything. So, in many cases, you have to work with grant organizations. We have the national, or the NHPRC at the National Archives, but it's limited in funds, $6 to $10 million a year for everybody. It doesn't go very far. Deeper, bigger grants can be found at these. So I came up with a short list here. And that's NEH, National Endowment for the Humanities. That's probably the big one. And I cross paths with them quite a bit. We talk from time to time about different things that are going on. Puerto Rico, things like that. National Endowment for the Arts, NEA. And they've done some good work in Puerto Rico and Virgin Islands and elsewhere. And if it has a tie into the arts, NEA is a player. And they can, you can go to the websites that I've listed here and get the criteria for whether you're eligible to apply for a grant. IMLS, the Institute of Museum and Library Services. Down in Puerto Rico, I went to a foundation down there, and I was amazed at how nice the facility was, all the equipment that they had, beautiful shelving. I asked, wow, where did you get this shelving? This is a nice installation. And they said, oh, we applied to IMLS and they gave us $116,000 for the shelving. It's like, that's pretty good for a foundation. So it's out there. You just have to look at this information and see how you can do it. Council on Library and Information Resources, CLEAR. That one's kind of got some potential there too. I'm looking at them for some of the electronic information, some of the tapes, or not tapes, some of the films, like we saw down in Puerto Rico. So they have some pretty significant grants and are worthy of looking at. And that CLEAR is tied in through funding with the Mellon Foundation, so there's some substantial money there. All right. Wow, came close. Well, we're still under, at least at the Q&A here. So in conclusion, I just want to say, first off, thank you. I've enjoyed being here. It's a great venue. It's my wife's and my first time to Lafayette. We like the area. We've enjoyed it. I've enjoyed talking to you. I'm available to answer any questions after this. And the next slide, I'm going to give you is my contact information. And if you have any questions, you can call me or send an email to me, or we can take some questions at this time. And do we have a hard stop at 4, or do we have 4? 4-ish, we have a hard stop at 4-ish. Okay, so we'll go ahead and take some questions. Yes?
Do you have any experience with salt mines?
Next slide.
Do you have any experience with storing archival materials in the salt mines? I know from Missouri and Oklahoma area, they were big on that.
I don't know if it's really this, if we're talking about the same thing, but the National Archives uses limestone caves. I don't know if it's really the salt mines. We use limestone caves in Missouri and Illinois, and it may be the same thing. They're huge, and it's not just the National Archives that uses these spaces. There's other organizations, other businesses, corporations that are in there in different places as well. It's one of our largest areas. I think we're probably, we have 1.1 million cubic feet up in Fort Worth above ground. But in the caves, as we call them, the underground facilities, they probably, I'm guessing, would have anywhere between 3 and 5 million cubic feet of records up there. That's just off the top of my head, but they're big. They're big. We have 2 in Missouri and 1 in Illinois. I think we're talking about the same thing. They're fine. They work good. The benefit for others in underground is pretty much constant temperature, humidity. That's pretty good. Because above ground facilities, that's one of our biggest expenses. When we build a facility like Fort Worth, it's very hot. Atlanta facility, very hot. And the utility cost goes way up. The cost per square foot goes up quite a bit. If you put them in underground storage, it's pretty constant. We like constant because it's good from a budgeting standpoint. You know what you're going to get from year to year. The effects of the records seems to be okay. We've been doing it for years, both archival and temporary records, and it seems to be working okay. So I personally have not seen any ill effects. The only thing that I've seen a little bit is maybe a little bit of dusting that comes off of the roof of the space. But we keep it clean. We have people that go in and clean the boxes off and the shelves off and that sort of thing. But we've had no ill effects that I'm aware of other than that. And again, it has benefits because of that constant temperature humidity control. That's a good part. Other questions? I'll wore you out. All right, going once, going twice. He's getting ready to run. All right, thank you so much.